Welcome to Break the Rules with Dr. Lauren Lax, a podcast dedicated to quieting the noise in the health, food, and fitness world. Dr. Lauren is a leading nutritionist, therapist, and functional medicine practitioner on a mission to help others thrive in their own lives, mind, body, and soul. And now, your host, Dr. Lauren Lax.
Well, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Break the Rules podcast, where we talk about quieting the noise in the health, food, and fitness world. And today, I'm super stoked to have Dr. Heidi Hanna in the house, who is the Chief Energy Officer of Synergy Brain Fitness, a company providing brain-based health and performance programs to individuals and organizations. She's also a senior researcher with the Brain Health Initiative and fellow and advisory board member for the American Institute of Stress. And today is the episode of stress. We're talking all about actually a concept, stress addiction, which I had never really heard of or thought about until talking to Dr. Heidi and hearing a little bit about her take on that. So Dr. Heidi, thanks so much for coming on. And if you could just give us a little bit of background about who you are and what got you into doing the work you're doing in the world around stress in the brain.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I love that you use the word stoked because it's one of my favorite words. We were just talking a little bit before we went on about our backgrounds and where we come from. And I actually grew up in Portland, Oregon, which I love. I love the Pacific Northwest. It still feels like home, but I always struggled actually with seasonal affective disorder. So I had a lot of anxiety and depression growing up and felt like I needed to live in a sunny climate. Ironically, I ended up getting a full ride scholarship to play softball at Penn State, which was not much better climate-wise. Then I moved to Orlando for 10 years thinking that would give me some sunshine, and it really just gave me a lot of thunderstorms. And eventually made my way to San Diego. And one of the things that I have been doing for the past few years with Reef, which is a global beach brand, looking at the benefits of the beach on our brain health and performance. So anytime I hear someone say, and you can see me, I know people are just listening to this, but I've got my Reef hat and it's got palm trees. And I really feel like we can benefit from taking our brain to the beach, even when our body's stuck at home or stuck in the office. And there's some strategies we can talk about a little bit later about how people can actually do that. So my background, my history, really, I got into this because I had to survive. I was misdiagnosed as a child a lot. So around the age of 10, I started having debilitating headaches and stomach aches and panic attacks. And the panic attacks were so extreme, I would actually faint and lose consciousness. So my parents, not knowing what to do about it, they misdiagnosed me with things like leukemia, food allergies. It was kind of like throwing darts on a dartboard. And ultimately they said, it's probably just stress. So I remember okay, I'm 10, 11, 12, how bad could stress be? Why is it literally hijacking my brain? And in the most inconvenient circumstances, like on flights, on first dates, on job interviews. So I began a lifelong journey, trying to figure out how to help myself just get through the day, and became fascinated with these different topics. So it started, I got a master's degree in psychology and I wanted to become a therapist. So I was working with a lot of people struggling with different things, and just saw how much nutrition was playing a role in their mental health. So then I got my first PhD in holistic nutrition, looking at the different ways that impact behavior, mood, and things like that. And then while I was doing that, I got certified in some different fitness strategies, exercise physiology. And then I ended up working for this really awesome company called the Human Performance Institute. And I worked for them for 10 years, where we worked with professional athletes and executives, really helping them understand energy management, like their physical, emotional, mental, spiritual energy. And that was amazing, except I was doing two things I feared the most every day, which was public speaking and flying. So I was traveling all around the world, kind of teaching people what to do, but then not coping well with my own stress. And while all that was happening, I had my third grandparent diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And so I started looking at the research about the brain and the nervous system, and realized that the number one risk factor for cognitive decline and dementia was actually chronic stress. And the light bulb went off of, wait a second, I'm living with chronic stress, and I know this. Why am I acting this way? And that's actually one of the reasons I wrote the book Stressaholic and started looking at stress addiction was I know this isn't good for me, but yet I kind of don't want to stop. And then the more I started talking about that book to my clients, they would all say, oh my gosh, that's me. I'm addicted to stress. But the funny follow-up part, and we can unpack this, then they'd say, well, but I don't want you to take it away from me. So it's like they could relate to the fact it was a problem, but they actually didn't really want the solution. And I always say, I think it's because we all fear that deep down, if we really slow down, we're not going to get started again.
Yeah. Wow. That's a powerful story. And I'm just really, again, excited to talk a little bit about stress addiction because I think I am in that camp for sure.
Yeah.
But let's kind of like set the stage of the lay of the land of that word stress. This kind of can go in one ear, out the other, because everyone's stressed, right? And that's something I usually by like 3 months into working with a client, they start getting it a little bit and talk a little bit about stress, what it is, both mental and physiological stress that can become just super normal. We don't even think of it or label it as stress.
Yeah. I always think about an experience I had a couple of years ago where I was teaching some junior high school students about stress. They wanted me to come out and teach them. And I started off by saying, now I know you guys don't really like deal with a lot of stress. And before I could even get the word out, they were all raising their hands. They were like, wait, no, we have to tell you something. And I just remember thinking like, really? Like, well, how stressful is it? And then I had to kind of go back again to my own life and what was going on. And I just listened to them vent about all of these things. And it was fascinating to me. And what I realized is that we've kind of stress a bucket that we just like drop everything into that we don't like about our life. So our parents are stressful, our homework is stressful, our siblings are stressful if you're looking at like junior high school kids. And ultimately, as I started to try to understand it a little bit better, I actually reached out to the experts in stress research, neuroscience, clinical work, and I had a chance to do actually my 4th year of a global stress summit. And so I love those discussions with people. But when I first started out, I would ask these experts, like, this is their job, right, is to teach us about stress. I would say, so in just a few words or just a few minutes, like, how would you define stress? And they would take like 45 minutes. So I'm thinking, okay, well, no wonder we have such a stress problem. We don't even know how to define it. So I did come up with a very simple way that I think has been really helpful for a lot of my clients to understand it and navigate better, which is that stress is what happens when demand exceeds capacity. And so we can look at all of the different areas that we have capacity. We could look at physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, social, for example, of kind of the Fab Five of human energy. And within all of those, there are moments where the demand on our capacity is greater than what we have right now. And that is normal, natural, to be expected. Stress is a good thing when we can adapt to it and make adjustments, because that's what causes growth, as you know. So I think it's important first to take the emotion out of the word and say, because a lot of people will say, well, I know there's good stress and bad stress. I don't even like that, because there's positive and negative stimulus that could lead to positive and negative outcomes. But really, there's good things that lead to bad outcomes. There's bad things that lead to good outcomes. What we're dealing with right now with COVID-19 is a great example of that. Like, there's a lot of bad stuff happening, but you can also look at how it's bringing us closer together. Here in San Diego, we're taking care of our homeless population in a way that we haven't done as successfully before, because we're kind of being forced to. So there's always this positive adaptability side to stress when we can navigate it effectively. But I think what happens for a lot of people, they feel the tension, the pressure of the buildup of the physiological side of what we might call fight or flight, which is adrenaline-based, high energy output. And they can feel overwhelmed by the sensation of it that actually causes them to not problem solve through it as effectively. And then my condition is kind of the flip side, which a lot of people don't realize. The stress response that we've been taught, which most people think of as fight or flight, those are just two of reactions. Actually, the shorter term acute reactions to stress, the freeze or faint reactions, are really the ones that are responsible for the more debilitating impact of stress, because they're fueled primarily by a hormone called cortisol, which actually causes breakdown in the brain and the body, causes inflammation. And cortisol is not a bad thing, but cortisol is designed to help us to survive long-term emergencies. And so everything that it's doing to try to help us can actually hurt us if we turn on that freeze or faint system and we stay there for too long. So my passing out is actually like an extreme case of a faint response. But when we look at kind of human health in general, this could also be irritable bowel syndrome, autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue. I mean, anyone that comes up with an illness, disease, disorder that they say they're not really sure what I would say the majority of that is actually being triggered by this kind of unmanaged chronic stress reaction. So that was like a 45-minute answer to your question,
No,
just like everybody else.
Well, I love how you bring up the freeze or faint too, because that is not a paradigm that we see, but that's just like the long term of like that cortisol response just pooping out a little bit. When you think about your history of like 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, and think about what stressors were exceeding your demand at the time, at that age, or is that something that you unpacked?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's like my obsession right now because there's a lot of young people really struggling. Anxiety is the leading mental health problem right now in the world, and especially college students. It's a population I'm really focused on right now with a new program called Brain Boss, where we're actually teaching college and how to become boss of their own brain. And so it's important that they understand that our relationship with stress is really determined by three primary factors. There's genetic predispositions, and 15 to 20% of the population has a genetic hardwired trait that makes them more susceptible to stress. There's a lot of different frameworks for looking at this right now. I call it stress sensitivity, but there's also a trait Dr. Elaine Aron has talked about for a long time called the highly sensitive person. And that is a sensory sensitivity. So 15 to 20% of the population has a sensory sensitivity that when they're born into this world, they will actually perceive stress in the home that is something we might call normal, like parents not getting along or siblings not getting along. They'll actually perceive that as trauma. I was one of those. So I came into the world highly sensitive and was told that I was too sensitive, oversensitive, too emotional, all that kind of stuff with good intentions, because parents tend to want their kids to be resilient. So they don't want them to be too soft, too sensitive. And so I think a lot of parents are quick to like try to fix that and push kids through that without understanding that the sensitivity is really an important thing to nurture and nourish in children. It's the pushing it down that causes those extreme reactions and a lot of the illnesses that we see, where you see mental challenges or behavioral challenges starting to manifest as physical or physiological challenges. So the genetic predisposition is number one. Number two, early life experiences. So there's something called the ACEs study. That's a pretty well-known study that looks at adverse childhood experiences. And again, keeping in mind that for a highly sensitive brain, quote unquote, normal, stressful situations as being traumatic. So this could be actual trauma, or it could just be sensitive type of trauma perception, and then ongoing lifestyle choices. So I can easily look back and say, I have a history of mental illness in my family, a history of some substance abuse in my family. And I also make the correlation then that it's actually not surprising to me that I've had 3 grandparents with Alzheimer's disease, because these are all the brain and the nervous system. And again, I would say all ways that we adapt to try to survive to extreme circumstances. But in the long run, if every day feels like extreme circumstances, it's not a healthy way to be reacting. So fortunately, just as much as we can adapt to negative, I want everyone to hear me when I say this is not a depressing podcast. This is like exciting, thrilling podcast. Our brain and our nervous system are plastic, which means that they're adaptable, which means that just like we can adapt in negative ways, we can intentionally choose to focus on different things, surround ourselves with, positive social support, eat the right things, move often, get enough sleep, all those common sense things. But those will actually allow us to rewire those same reactions in a more positive direction. That's the brain boss idea. Like you can actually shape type of brain you want, and then you can look at life through a different lens. It's actually a lot more enjoyable.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Mastering mastering the mind, mastering the brain.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
let's kind of unpack some of that, the stress addiction. Tell us what this
Hmm.
concept is and how many people you have found fall into that camp.
Yeah. So I'll start again with a story. I was traveling and, all this stressful work. And I know a lot of people probably do this too, but we're all busy and we've all been taught like live like you're dying and you got to hustle and let's hack. And I like hate all those words because I think we need to calm down, chill out, and like heal our system and stop trying to hack it so much. But I got in the grind of that just like everyone else does. And so I would say, like, I'm going to go speak at this really beautiful location. So I'll just stay an extra day and that'll be my vacation. I always tell people, we don't hardly go on vacation. We just take our brain to a different spot and we keep working, usually. So here I was, and I was in this beautiful inn in like Napa Valley. It was like really beautiful, really chill. And I had done my work. And so I was going to spend the day kind of doing spa stuff. I love spa stuff. And I always find like spa is a good way for me to unwind because I'm paying money. So I'm going to like get everything I can out of it and really try to disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
So I did this. I go and I sit in the hot tub area, and there was a sign on the wall, and it had like step-by-step instructions, like sit in the hot tub and then take the bath and then use the exfoliator and then go to the steam room. And I thought, oh, this is awesome. All I have to do is follow the steps and then I'll be relaxed. And so the first one was just to sit still. And I was like, nope, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. I like, got a book, got my phone, got something. And my first thought was, wow, I am so blessed that I love my work than be at the spa. And I just remember this almost out of body experience of like, who said that? That's ridiculous. That is not true. It's my brain telling me to keep hustling and keep hacking and keep on the grind. And if I don't respond right now, maybe they won't be there tomorrow. What if nobody needs me? And I think that it's just this, again, realization of, oh my gosh, the stopping is hard. And I felt this sensation of my body as if I were tossing from sugar, like, oh, this is going to be uncomfortable. So wait, what if I actually leave my phone in the hotel room next time? Or what if I actually put my phone on airplane mode, even when I'm on the ground? And that switch gives me something tangible that I can do, but the feeling is still the same. The feeling is like, it brings up all of these emotions, insecurities, things we've been taught in the media. And it was fascinating. So I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm addicted to stress. And then I started looking at the research, and there's tons. I mean, stress acts on the same reward pathways as any other addictive substance. And if you think about that from a survival perspective, so I always kind of go back to that. When I look at integrative neuroscience, you can also look at like evolutionary neuroscience and the way that the brain is hardwired. And if we do experience something that is truly a threat, we need to remember that so that we don't do it again. And so the way that we consolidate memory, or a part of that, is the reward pathways. So we'll have chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, sometimes oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical. And those things actually create the chemical cocktail in our brain to remember a situation. So what's happening is that when we experiencing that, we're getting those same things. So we make the same mistake, but then we start to thrive on that sensation. It's kind of like, in a way, the runner's high. When we're running, I mean, there's a lot of good things that are happening, but in some ways we're doing a little bit of damage to our physical body that needs to be repaired. So, or even, I mean, this is super extreme, but people who cut themselves or harm themselves in some way, there's pain, but then you also get the positive kind of endorphins and chemicals to help you get through the difficult situation so that you can heal. Well, the problem is we're going at such a fast pace that we don't like get that hit of positive feel good emotion and then go, okay, so now I'm going to take a nap. We get the hit of that and then we're like, okay, I need it again. I need it again. And I think that issue that I mentioned in the very beginning of like, I am so tired. I'm needing the stress to stimulate not only the feel good emotions, but also the adrenaline so I can get some energy, that if I actually were to stop, I might not get started again. So number one, I'm not going to feel good. Number two, I'm not going to get anything done. And that's just not okay with me. So the three things that always come to mind for me, why we're so addicted to stress, are stimulation, because most people are just tired and they're not getting good sleep and they're not fueling themselves well. They're not moving often enough. So they just go back to what they know, which is stress. So stimulation is a big part. Distraction is another one. Like, I don't want to feel what I feel, so I'll just feel stressed because everyone's doing it and that's more comfortable. Or validation, right? And I think this is a huge problem too, is like the busier you are, the more stressed you are, the bigger the, I'm really a big deal sign is that goes in your office.
Mm.
And that's something, I mean, I've been working on trying to fix culturally for so long, but it's just so like wired into our society right now that it's like, well, how long? If I slept 3 hours, oh, I'm too. It's like, oh, you win because you're more miserable. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I used to be the one that said, "Well, I'll sleep when I dead," and when I'm dead, and tried to run off that 4 to 6 hours, something in there, and then found 7 hours is my magic. But talk a little bit about. So, what about those of us that just like I I can't really sit still if I'm not working. I have a very big growth mindset, so I like to continually be learning or like kind of like striving for something, and
Yeah.
I feel energized by it. However, like if you just say like Lauren, just chill out, like I don't really know what that means or how to do that, and so and I don't feel like at unrest, but I feel like more unrest if I'm not doing something. Does that?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah, it totally
what's
makes
going
sense.
on there? And then what? How do you coach people to like have a yin and yang, or to be able to even become aware of that?
Well, I think the first thing is just everyone should keep in mind that the human system is designed to oscillate. So everything is patterns, everything is rhythm. We're supposed to have an up and down. So if you hook yourself up to any monitor, I don't care what it is, blood sugar, blood pressure, heart rate, brain waves, even our muscle, if anything were to give you a flat, you would be dead. So the idea that you should never get up and go until you don't want to go. I mean, we literally have no oscillation. People get up and they rely on caffeine, sugar, stress to get them going. And then they go flatline all day and then they can't figure out why they can't fall asleep. And that we're causing this like opposite hormone pattern where cortisol is supposed to be high in the morning, to help us get up, and low at night, and it's reverse melatonin. And most people are just tired and wired at the end of the day because they have relied on stress hormones to keep them going. And that's a problem. But you bring up a couple really good points. And one is, it's like when someone says, well, I don't feel good when I slow down. I'd be like, well, you wouldn't feel good either if you were on crack and you stopped doing it. Like it still doesn't make it okay, right? So there's that. But the other thing is that there's active recovery. So I'm not saying you go like do nothing. I think this is where a lot of people go wrong with meditation, for example, is people think like, okay, I'm going to meditate, so I'm going to sit here and think about nothing. And no, you're going to torture yourself if you try that, because that's not humanly possible unless you're living in an ashram and you're practicing. I mean, that's a skill that you develop. It's like trying to run a marathon the first time that you ever walk. It's just not going to happen. But there's active ways to get recovery. So for someone like you who says, well, I always want to be learning and growing and striving and being the best version of myself, I would say, awesome. How do you do that in a way that complements what you're doing? When's the last time you read a book just for fun, watched a funny video? Do you go to comedy clubs? Like, what do you like to do? Are you an artist? Do you do photography? Do you like humor? I could go on and on and on. It's still creative energy, meaning that there's an energy output, but it's using a totally different part of your brain. It's allowing you to breathe. I moved to the beach specifically for that reason a few days ago because I live downtown San Diego, which was great when I was traveling all the time because it's right by the airport. But then when we went on like lockdown, I was working from there. I was up on the 24th floor. We've had 5 earthquakes in the last couple of years. It was torture. So I said, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to go to the beach. Well, now my downtime is never, I'm going to lay out. Like that would be awful. I'm not a layout person. What I will do is go for a hike, go for a walk, go take pictures. I'll go record some video, just look for things that are interesting, look for things that are amusing. I love going to the zoo. The San Diego Zoo is amazing. I've, got a membership to the museums right before they close. So hopefully they'll extend that for me. But, so all of these things they're recovery. But if you think about this as battery instead of like resting, it's just another mindset that you can have where you're saying, how can I intentionally do something to recharge my own battery so that when I go back into taking action, I can do so more efficiently, more effectively, and maybe I can even have more fun as I do that. So I don't feel like I'm constantly holding my breath and rushing through the day.
Oh, I love how you talk about that. And recharge, that piques my interest so much more than just chill out, Lauren. But it could be the same thing that I'm doing within that. Um, a lot of the listeners listening to this tend to be like very driven individuals. Let's talk about stress and kind of this concept within like the exercise realm. Like as we're talking about recovery, that brought that to mind. And a lot of the listeners are very health conscious. They're already getting workouts regularly. And that's my backstory as well, driving my body into the ground to the point where I was basically doing my body more harm than good. But how do you coach someone? Because that was mostly a stress addiction. It was like I needed that kind of dopamine hit from that. How can we use that recharge battery concept for like retraining that versus just stop?
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of fitness experts about this. As an athlete myself, I played softball in college, had a full ride scholarship. I was a horrible runner growing up. I was really overweight. I struggled with an eating disorder for a long period of time, trying to manage my weight. And that's a lot of what drove me into studying what I study, and where I found that you can have all the information in the world and still make horrible decisions, because when we get hijacked by our brain, we're not logical. I mean, I can literally remember moments where I was walking to go get food to binge on and thinking like, an alien has taken over. Like, I can't stop this from happening right now. So that's very addictive behavior. And then we tend to then go to the extreme with other things. Then all of a sudden I was running marathons. Then I ran a marathon and a half. Then I ran a half marathon every month. It was like, this goal setting. So I get that. That said, everyone I talk to will say the same thing, that we underemphasize our need for recovery and repair. So as a pitcher, for example, there was a pitch count that we had. Like, there was a certain number of innings we could play and still be successful. And I would say the same thing with our fitness. There is a point where we are just breaking down the system more and more and more. And so I think as a trend in the fitness industry, and having talked to a lot of professional athletes and other people who really want to optimize their performance, they're now starting to fully grasp things like heart rate variability. That's a very practical, tangible thing that people can actually be measuring. And you can look at on a daily basis your heart rate variability, which is the beat to beat change in your heart rate. It is the best indicator of physical fitness. So what will happen for a lot of people is they'll be training and training and training, and then they'll actually start looking at heart rate variability and see, like, I shouldn't train today. Your body is giving you all the signs and all the signals to say it's time for a day off. It's time to whatever. You need to ice, you need to stretch, you need to rest, you need to sit in a hot tub, you need to get massage. So there's ways I think that still you can be actively recovering, like go get a massage or go get stretched or go play a sport or go do some balancing or flexibility exercises. But you have a limit to how much you can really push yourself and optimize strength growth or cardiovascular growth. And I think what people will find if they actually start to follow that oscillation strategy and really kind of look under the hood at how they're doing by measuring some of these things, whether it's heart rate variability or cortisol DHEA ratios or other things that we can look under the hood, they're going to start noticing they feel better when they follow an oscillation pattern. They actually get stronger. But I think that's the mindset shift that has to happen, is we almost have to trust our own body to let us know what we need and what's going to be most helpful for us, and be comfortable individualizing that for ourselves. Maybe work with a coach or someone who can help us understand, what can we look at to kind of determine how well we're doing right now, and really measure that instead of chasing after every possible, solution or fad that's out there that might be the hot thing for a minute.
Right. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. And the just taking that recharge mentality too on the days off or your like less intensive workout days, of doing something like going on a hike or getting outside and moving your body still. It doesn't have to be sitting on a couch eating bonbons on days off.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, I say that to people all the time. My suggestion is you do exercise every day. Like, don't think, is it an off day, an on day? Just do something, but modify the intensity, the duration, frequency. Whether you're with people or you're alone, there's a lot of ways to mix it up. And everything about the human system adapts best when we're changing it. We know that in our fitness routines. You can't do the same thing every day and continue to grow. So I think we can be creative about that as well. Are you doing it inside? Are you doing it outside? Are you in a pool? Are you, in a gym? Of course, I'm always going to say get outside when you can, because I think we get extra benefits of being outside.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about too oscillation, like that yin and the yang in our relationship with food and the foods we're eating. So something that I fell into for a long time and something that I see a lot of my clients is like maybe 5 to 10 foods that you're limited to. You're eating the same exact things every day. And it doesn't even have to be like I'm craving, I don't know, whatever, Ben and Jerry's, but just varying the diet and how that can be more beneficial. We can know that mentally of how do we break that, maybe that addiction that we may have to just like our 5 to 10 foods that are so limited, and that becomes more of a stressor.
Yeah, I would say I like both of these. I'm ridiculously simple. I eat almost the same thing every day. And I think I do it because I just like simplicity. I actually am not a foodie. I kind of don't care. So I eat now more just for the nutrients I need. Thank God I married a man a couple of years ago who likes to cook, because I don't. So that's great. But I would say that we can vary, especially our fruits and vegetables, spices. I mean, from a brain health and performance perspective, those are the things that have the most impact, trying to get things that are in season. So I think some of the staple foods, things like, your complex carbohydrates, things like quinoa, or even your lean proteins, if you eat meat at all, having salmon and other types of fish, but really mixing up like your produce, like what's in season, what's bright, what's colorful. A lot of the colleagues I work with at the Brain Health Initiative talk about eating the rainbow. So really trying to get as much color on your plate as possible. And I always recommend people that half of their plate is produce. So that'll give you a lot of variety right there. Even if you always eat the same, whole grain bread or the same, gluten-free pasta. I'm always so careful about what I say. Because there's so many diets out there. Or maybe you don't do carbs at all. You get your carbs and your starches from fruits and vegetables, which is totally fine. But I think if you can look for color and experiment with that, I also say the same with people who have kids who are picky eaters, is that a lot of times we don't have to be extreme about it, but blending things, doing smoothies or juices or sauces. I mean, there's some amazing spices out there like turmeric, cinnamon, and nutmeg that we can add to our dishes. I love a good sriracha hot sauce. So I don't cook, but I spice. So my husband makes the soup. We throw everything we possibly can, make it really easy, as many vegetables as we can, whatever kind of greens you want in there. And then I go in with all the spices and like heat it up. And I think that's a good way to make sure we're getting that variety as well.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, so once we acknowledge that we are stress addicted, and what do we do with that? Do you have like a step process?
Yeah, I do. So I think that there's a couple of different ways I think about this. So I think the easiest thing for me to tell people is that one of the best things we can do is to acknowledge first, and then to assess, appreciate, and adjust our relationship with stress. So the first thing is like, understand this is a relationship you have with your life. Stress isn't bad. It is stimulation. It can be used for positive or negative outcomes. So if we can step outside of that, take the emotion out of it, and just say, when we're feeling stressed, what's going on and why? Like, get to a curiosity framework that just says, what am I feeling? Why is it there? I think that that's really helpful. And then appreciate that stress is actually trying to help us. So I think a lot of the addictive component of it is beat ourselves up. We start to feel weak. I don't like feeling tired. I don't like feeling stressed. And then it becomes this vicious cycle. Instead of just saying, hey, I'm tired. I had a long day today. Or, hey, I'm stressed. I've been looking at a screen for 12 hours or whatever it might be. And that's okay. And the feelings I'm having, the tension in my neck, back, or shoulders, or the irritability, or feeling hangry, or, whatever's going on, like, that's natural. That's normal too. Be kind to yourself and just appreciate that this is just information that you can use, and then make an adjustment. So I would say, especially if you realize, okay, I may be addicted to stress. I'm not willing to totally break up with it yet, but I'm willing to do one thing different to recharge my battery a little bit more than maybe I did yesterday. I'd say that's a great start. So what's that thing? What's the adjustment you're willing to make? And I usually, if I'm working one-on-one with clients or if I'm teaching other coaches how to coach people through stress mastery, I'll say to ask good questions like, what is most realistic for you to do? What's worked best for you in the past? What's the smallest thing that you think would have the biggest impact? And people usually actually have an idea of what that is. Now we can brainstorm different ways. Like if someone says, well, I really find that when I'm out in nature, that I feel at peace, if I'm hiking. And then it's like, okay, we can work with that, right? Like, where could you go? If you thought about going to the zoo, maybe go to a garden. There's a lot of botanical gardens out there. That's where coaching can be helpful, is to help people be creative about how to bring that into their life. But ultimately, it's up to each of us to kind of say, what's the thing? What's the thing that's worked for me? And if you can't think of anything, I like to encourage people, think of what you loved as a child. Like, what did you love to do just for fun before you had to think about paying your bills? And do more of that, build that in as a priority. So you're not saying like, oh, it would be nice if I could read this book or watch this movie. Like, when are you going to do it? One of the things that for myself when I was going through a bout of depression was I started watching funny movies at 6:00 in the morning because I was waking up anyway. And I felt like that was such an indulgent. And I was like, why? Other people are working at 9. Why can't I watch a movie for 2 hours that's funny as I lay here in bed? And maybe I'll think about something positive instead of thinking about the fact that I'm miserable because I'm depressed. And about a week later, I started feeling like, okay, well, now actually I'm going to get up and journal, or now I'm going to get up and go for a walk. And so I think sometimes those little nudges can make a difference and just give us the capacity to now kind of do one more thing and then one more thing.
Yeah, to recharge. I like how just continually come back to that. It brought to mind, I used to wake up and just check my email first thing in the morning. And then I kind of just made a rule for myself, breaking rules, but breaking to not check it for the first 2 hours of waking and to instead like really cultivate a morning routine that's energizing. And so I think that's a great message that you give.
And that's one of the best ways to break rules. Yeah, it's one of the best ways to break rules. I'm sure you know that is replace it. Because if we break it, we feel like we're void of something that we had. And most people, by the way, do that. The number one stressor after surveying 38,000 people was the feeling that there's not enough time to get it all done. And most of the time that happens because we reach for our phones first. So you're breaking this automatic pathway that you had of reaching for your phone and checking your email or seeing what's going on. And now I suggest is like use some action to do something better. So now you grab your phone, realize it's in airplane mode and listen to a song or journal or look at a funny meme. There's other ways to do that. And I think that's just another good kind of lesson is look at the things you're already doing. Those are the rules of your life. Like your habits are ruling your life. If you want to break a rule, really think about how am I going to substitute something new as a new, healthier habit. And if you compare those two together, somehow actually makes it easier to make that pivot.
Mic drop. I love that. Well, Dr. Heidi, where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing and what you're up to?
Thank you. People go to my website. So it's HeidiHanna.com. At the end, it's just HANNA. A lot of people like to put an H on the end. Like I have 2 first names, but HeidiHanna.com. And then if people want to see what we're doing as well with the Brain Health Initiative, that's at brainhealthinitiative.org. It's actually a longitudinal study that we're doing looking at brain health and performance over the lifespan. So really excited to be part of that as well.
Awesome. I'll definitely be putting links in the show notes to all the good things and your book as well. And so
thank you.
Keeping up with your work.